Hi, Dolores. Hi, Kay. Hi, Carmen. Jeffrey Denton. Nice to see you all here. But please do share for me as much as you can. I didn't get a chance to share tonight. I've been trying to get my system to move faster. For some reason, it's been very slow tonight. I don't know the reason why. All I know is that there is bad weather around here. Hi, Greg Mallard. Very nice to see you. Anyway, please share as much as you can because I can use as much help as I can get this evening in the sharing department. So Greg is asking me whether I'm in FB jail, Joe. No, I don't think I am, Greg, as far as I know. That's not the problem. What I usually do is share at the beginning. It's my system. It's giving me a very sluggish response. And I don't know why that is exactly. I checked my task manager and I don't think I have any problem there. Don't have that many windows open, so I shouldn't have a problem there. So I don't know what's going on, but please do me the solid of doing as much as you can in the sharing department because I just haven't had the time to share. Yeah, Greg says must be the rain or something from a cold front coming through the states. I think it probably is that because I could just see myself on the screen and everything is herky jerky. And I'm directly connected to the internet, and I usually have a very, very fast internet. But for example, last night I had a very, very fast internet. Now, all of a sudden, I'm going in and out. It's very strange. And Carmen says, latest from Dr. Campbell featuring his free books to download for free. Great. Yeah, Dr. Campbell is my favorite expert on COVID, or certainly one of my favorite experts on COVID. He's an English doctor, okay, of nursing, and he just does a very good job every day. Greg says it's supposed to get down to 30 degrees here in South Georgia tonight. Yeah, it was down in the 20s yesterday here, okay, in the DC area yesterday night. It snowed here today also. I don't know if it's still snowing. Is it still snowing, honey?
I don't know. I'll look out the window.
Okay, look out the window.
Listen, how come when you look at me, you're looking out that way?
Oh, I don't know. That's just the way things work.
Okay. I'm going to check the snow.
Okay, thanks. Now, what you're seeing is a mirror image in the camera. Perfect weather for hot cocoa, that's for sure. Well, I'm contenting myself with some red wine. I see about a delay of 3 seconds between when I do something and when it actually appears on the screen. And it might be longer than that because it has to go out to Facebook after it hits my system from StreamYard. Anyway,
It's not snowing.
it's not snowing anymore here. So,
Ice down the road.
so their forecast was a little bit off. They expected things to start, I think, 4 a.m. in the morning, and they didn't start until maybe 10:30 here. And now it's already over. So I guess we've gotten pretty good luck here, as we often do, in actually getting hit by heavy snowstorms. But it seems to have had an effect on the internet here, for sure. Okay, so I should tell you there's a fight going on Twitter right now. Actually, lots of fights between people who want the squad and AOC to do something with respect to Nancy Pelosi and other people uh, who are just simply saying, trust the squad, whatever they do is fine, and blah, 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 blah. Carmen says, yeah, visuals are off. It's okay as long as we can hear Bonnie in the background. Greg says it's very rainy here all day. So, where I've gotten involved is in suggesting that we should not want the squad to make a deal, okay, with Nancy Pelosi to give her their votes in return for a Medicare for All bill. Okay, my position has been that what we need to do is for the squad to get rid of Nancy Pelosi. They have 8 votes now. They can block her, absolutely block her. If they don't want her to be the speaker, she cannot be the speaker. That's the way things are set up now. Once they stalemate her for a number of ballots, I believe at that point she is going to withdraw and open the way for other candidates to run. At that point, I think the squad and other progressives will be able to negotiate with the other candidates for a whole host of things. I think we can make a deal for a whole host of things. Lots of floor votes, but also good committee assignments, choosing the rest of the leadership team, actually affecting the change with respect to the DCCC and selecting someone who's likely to give a fair shake, okay, to progressive candidates. It's time to get rid, okay, of Mama Bear. Carmen says AOC isn't going to play along. I guess she's loyal to rotten Mama Bear. Maybe so. But we are fighting about it on Twitter. We're mobilizing people. We're having some success. Also, Jimmy Dore is having, of course, a great deal more success with his idea of getting Nancy to place a Medicare for All vote on the floor if she does stay on. That was his idea. Okay, now David Sirota is for trying to get her to do a lot more, and he published something where he specified 5 things that he wants from her that he thinks the squad ought to negotiate for. That's fine. That's fine. But I don't think we can trust her to keep her end of the bargain. The reason why is this is probably her last term, okay, as speaker. So, what incentive does she have to fulfill her bargain? In other words, we would just have to trust her once she becomes the speaker, that she will do what she agreed to do. I don't trust her. She has screwed up everything so badly, this year especially. She screwed up everything. She screwed up the impeachment. She screwed up the CARES Act. She screwed up the pressure to do something with respect to COVID. She has screwed up the negotiations with the Republicans for a very long time now. My view, she has to go. Period. Anyway, let's shift over to stimulus concerns, okay, at this point. I'm going to share the screen now. What I do. Sorry, it's taking a moment to share the screen because let's see, do I have the right one? Yes, I do have the right one. You should be seeing it now. It says stimulus checks have been moved by Bernie Hawley, that's Josh Hawley, who is a conservative, of course, okay, and a Missouri senator. Also, the Squad and the Congressional Progressive Caucus. The Squad, okay, and the caucus have been calling for stimulus checks, and the Squad has been calling for $2,000 a month in what some are still calling stimulus checks. I've entitled them stimulus checks here. Some of them are referring to it as actually relief checks. Others are referring to them as survival checks. I think they are more like survival checks. Anyway, when you fight, sometimes you win, because that seems to be what's going on with Bernie Hawley, the Squad, okay, and the CPC. Now, I don't know if they're going to get everything they want. What we're hearing right now is, let me share something else with you. Let's just go through what has been happening. Let me share the right slide here. And there it is. So, what basically happened with Bernie, okay, and Josh Hawley, okay, and now with the House members, the Squad, okay, and the progressive House members, is they've got some leverage. They have leverage because there's been a relief bill under consideration that does give some relief to people in the form of additional unemployment insurance of $300 a week, and also money for a bunch of other things, which we'll go over, okay, in just a while. But that opened up, okay, the subject once more of doing a relief bill of some kind. Until recently, McConnell, okay, and the Republicans were pretty silent about that. But because of the way the Senate works, the Senate was not going to be able to recess, to go home for Christmas. In order to go home for Christmas, they had to have a vote without an objection in the Senate. Even one senator, okay, could make an objection, and they wouldn't be able to recess. So Bernie used that, and he combined, okay, with Hawley, who backed him in that. They both demanded stimulus checks of $1,200 for people to be added to the stimulus bill, and they said, nobody's going home for Christmas, okay, until we get that. So now, people in the Senate really, really want to go home for Christmas and be with their families. They really, really do. And for this very trivial of reasons, and for the complementary reason that it would look very, very bad for the senators to still be in session because Bernie and Hawley were holding them there. Okay. And for the senators to be demanding to go home for Christmas when so many Americans don't have any money to have any Christmas at all and are about to get thrown out of their homes besides, and about to go without any employment insurance too. And of course, they're forced to meet because they have to pass a government funding bill. Government funding expires in just a few days, then the government would have to shut down. So the senators would be going home with a government that had been shut down because they hadn't come to a deal with Bernie and Hawley, and with now a very large number of members of the House who don't want to leave. Okay, the Progressive Caucus evidently voted 101 members to stay in session until a relief bill was passed with stimulus checks in it. So it started with the squad. Then that expanded to the rest of the Progressive Caucus. And when the Progressive Caucus was polled, it turned out that to a person, all 101 people were insisting there had to be a relief bill and there had to be stimulus checks. So the leverage was the time of year and the need to pass a government funding bill and the need to pass some sort of relief bill. And all those things came together and gave Bernie and Hawley and the other progressives some leverage. That is how it happened. The opening came. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that exactly. The opening came when there was a change. There was a change in the dynamics on the relief bill that the problem solvers caucuses on both sides of the aisle in both the House and the Senate were trying to craft. They wanted a $908 billion relief bill with no stimulus checks. Because Mitt Romney was saying, well, gee, we got to keep this under $1 trillion. Because I'm fiscally responsible, so we got to keep this under $1 trillion. So in the course of the negotiations, but Senator McConnell was insisting on a liability forgiveness measure for the corporations. A very broad-based sort of corporate immunity thing from COVID lawsuits, which largely have not occurred as yet, in spite of the terrible way some corporations have been treating their people. But Mitch, since March, has been after this corporate immunity thing and has stubbornly clung to it. And he was still stubbornly clinging to it. And the Problem Solvers Caucus was basically saying, okay, let's do this. Let's separate this into two bills. One bill will have all the relief items in it, and they weren't talking stimulus checks yet. That would be $748 billion bill. And there would be a second bill that would have state and local aid in it of 160 billion, and would also have the corporate immunity thing in it. It would have both. And so you could pass that as a separate bill. Okay, and Mitch McConnell and a lot of the Republicans very much against aid to state, okay, and local governments, because they only love the corporations. They don't love the state and local governments, in spite of the fact they're constantly harping on the virtues of federalism in our government. They don't want to support the states in the federal system. They want the states to cut jobs from everybody, so Biden's economy will be ruined so they can get back in 2022. That's part of the political forces here that are jockeying. Okay. Well, this splitting of the two bills in two is what gave the opening for the stimulus bill, because it became obvious after a while to everybody concerned that you could jettison the state and local corporate immunity schlong they were putting together, and that would leave you with $160 billion more to spend. And with that $160 billion, you could have a stimulus bill. Since the Republicans had already said that they were willing to go along with the stimulus bill of $908 billion. So basically, the progressives were now jumping into the breach and saying, let's spend that then. Let's not do state and local aid, which Nancy Pelosi had insisted on for months and months and months and months. And she gave way, and suddenly it was all right as long as there was no corporate immunity in it. It was all right to get rid of it. Postpone them both until next year. And just have a $908 billion bill with both the unemployment relief in it for 4 months and stimulus checks in it. Of course, one problem is that the stimulus checks and the child support payments that were going to be included, I shouldn't keep calling them stimulus checks, the survival checks, including the child support payments, we're probably going to come to more like $300 billion as opposed to $160 billion. And so the very generous people inside of the Senate was saying, oh, okay, so instead of $1,200 stimulus checks or survival checks, what we're going to have instead is $600 to $700 stimulus checks and $500 for each child. So that makes it more generous for families, because it's going to be $500 for each child. And that was calculated as coming to something like 160 or 170 billion. So they were real near the 908 billion, and it began to look like people were making a deal. But now, sometime today, Senator John Thune was saying some Republicans in the caucus were talking about not giving stimulus checks to those drawing on unemployment insurance. I guess they thought that for the unemployed people, $1,200 a month from the unemployment, or a little more, $1,300 a month, that was enough for them. They didn't need any more money for their children, and they didn't need any more money for themselves. That was too much money to give them, because think about it. If you gave $1,300, okay, to an unemployed person, or $1,300 to two of the unemployed people, if they were to, okay, in a family, then they'd be getting $2,600 a month. And then they'd also be getting the stimulus checks, the child support checks, okay, of $1,100 a month. So then they'd be getting, an additional $2,200 a month. And guess what? With all that money coming in, they wouldn't have the incentive to work. And of course, we've got to have our people going out to work so they can be continuously exposed to COVID and can die from COVID between now and the time that everybody has sufficient amount of vaccine to give everybody checks. Because evidently Republicans are interested in killing off as many of their voters as they possibly can. I don't know what goes on in their heads, but they prioritize things, as you know, in an extremely inhuman way. So anyway, but there was this opening, but there are still Republicans in the caucus who are fulminating around, trying to cut back on the possible compromise which had been crafted, trying to build in poison pills of one sort or another. So maybe things still won't work. If they do work, though, when is it going to happen? One of the senators was saying, it's going to happen by Friday. It's going to happen by Friday. But some other people who are evidently calculating time necessary a little differently are saying, well, no, it's probably not going to happen until next Wednesday. Well, there's a problem with that. Next Wednesday is December 23rd, and the funding is due to expire. The extension of government funding for 1 week, which they passed on the 11th of December, is due to expire on the 18th, which is Friday. That's why the Republican senator was saying, we're going to have it done by Friday. And since there are people who want to put the stimulus check and maybe the whole relief bill into the government funding bill, in order to be able to do the whole thing at once so everybody votes for everything, there's a sense from those people that they need another extension of government funding, this time at least until the 23rd, to give Congress the time to pass the government funding bill, which will take us through, I don't know, maybe the whole of next year, not with respect to relief, but with respect to not having to shut down the government again. So that's the current timeline. The most realistic expectation that I can find out of all this is that probably the stimulus checks will be passed on Wednesday, December 23rd, along with the government funding bill and the rest of the relief bill. So let's now go and find out what are likely to be in these bills. And I emphasize that these bills have not been finalized yet, and we don't know what the final bills are going to look like. So let us see what's going on. There was a little bit of a summary what was going on in Dayen's column yesterday, Dave Dayen, okay, at the American Prospect. So I'm going to share the screen on that article and cover the high points for you. Sorry, the computer is slow, as I told you earlier. even though I closed and opened my browser. I didn't reboot the whole machine, which might have been advisable, but here we are. So, this article was entitled, What's in the Last Chance for COVID Relief? This was done on December 15th by Dave Dayen, not David Sirota. We are now 4 days away from a self-imposed congressional deadline to pass an omnibus spending package that will fund the government through next September. The last train leaving the station for COVID-19 relief this year. Yesterday, the bipartisan 908 group, quote unquote, or quote unquote, Gang of Eight group, or New York Dolls, and whatever nickname they've given themselves, finally released on December 14th actual text of their agreement on the relief package. This will get discussed in the media as a $908 billion bill, but it's surely not. It's $748 billion in the part that matters, the part that actually has a chance to pass. That's what I just was talking about. One contentious issue was a corporate liability shield for negligence in exposing customers or employees to the virus. We actually have text on that, and it's much worse, retaining the McConnell-Cornyn provisions that would block lawsuits over a host of employment laws like the Federal Labor Standards Act, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, Title I of the Americans with Disability Act, and the WARN Act, which gives workers notice before firing. It also would allow the Justice Department to prosecute lawyers who seek information from employers about COVID exposure. Prosecute lawyers who do discovery, seek information. Discovery is information. They want to block legal discovery. This is horrible. It's a horror. It's ridiculous. It's totally barbaric. The thing is, only Senator Joe Manchin in the end agreed to that package. That's not enough to pass a bill. So they packaged it with something Democrats had to sacrifice. $160 billion in state and local fiscal aid, derided as a blue state bailout by Mitch McConnell, but actually a desperately important measure to prevent long-lasting austerity that will subvert efforts at the federal level towards economic recovery. But by the way, I saw something on that today that was important. There was a Zoom call that one was able to pick up, the public was able to pick up on, where Jay Powell, the chair of the Fed, was answering questions from a whole bunch of people. Powell was very forthright and very sober, and he is generally very bright and very, very good, though even though he's totally convinced that we don't have any problem with the national debt right now, at all, he still has the idea in his head that under certain conditions, the debt could become unsustainable. Of course, as we know from MMT, it is never unsustainable for a monetary sovereign. But putting that aside, he did have a whole lot of very sensible things to say. And in one part of the Zoom call, he answered a question about would he do anything to try to relieve the problems the states were having, state, and local aid. He opined that he didn't say he would not, but he opined that, well, first, he sort of opined that he wanted some authority from Congress to be able to help with anything, which, by the way, I don't think he needs. I think he can use the authority of the Fed under Section 14 of the Fed Act to give very low interest loans, okay, to municipalities and to states, and to make them very low interest loans. I'm not sure whether he's limited in the term of those loans, but even if they are limited to a 6-month term, of course, he can roll those loans over forever and make them virtual grants. It can become Fed policy that they don't have to be paid back for 30 years, and then the Fed could manage to forgive them in 30 years, basically making them grants. So he has the power, I think. He has the authority, the Fed does, to provide a bailout, okay, for the municipalities and for the local governments. But his disposition was to say he's not sure they're going to need a bailout. He's aware that they're cutting people now, and that could have a bad effect. But he believes he made some very forward-looking statements about his expectations for the economy. He believes the economy, even though things are very, very bad now with respect to COVID, and he's fully aware of that, fully aware of that, he thinks the economy will start to recover sometime in the spring of this year, and that it may be that if the federal government provides fiscal relief now in the form of stimulus checks, okay, and unemployment insurance, that the economy can't get going for long enough that state revenues won't completely collapse, and that he won't have to do anything to help the states. Now, I think he may feel differently when he and Janet Yellen get together. We also learn that he hasn't spoken to Janet Yellen yet, but he expects to have a very good working relationship with her. But the transition just has not gotten to the point yet where he would be having meetings with her. He said he had great respect for her record when she was the chair of the Fed, and he knows her work, and very impressed with her, and he had all nice things to say. I believe they are going to have a very friendly relationship, because I think both are usually very fact-based in their reasoning, and I think they're going to get along very well together. And I don't think Jay Powell is an ideological Republican at all. Listening to him and the way he views things, okay, and the way he says things, even though he was appointed by Trump because he was supposedly a conservative, he isn't like any conservative that I've been talking to lately, or hearing talk lately, unless it's Saagar Enjeti. But that's, I mean, he seems to talk, generally speaking, only good sense. Now, occasionally, I don't agree with what he says, but after all, I mean, I don't agree with everything that anybody says, so you know how that is. Anyway, okay, it seems to me he might have a disposition to help the state, okay, and local governments based on his attitudes. If a Treasury Secretary could make the case to him that he has the authority to do this under Section 14, and that it would be very important for the economy and very good for the economy if he were to do it, and wholly in line with the mandate the Fed has to do everything it can to maintain full employment, okay, into the economy, I think Janet Yellen can talk him into using Section 14 to give those very low interest loans to states and to local governments. I mean, when I say very low interest, I'm talking close to zero interest loans to state, okay, and local governments, so that they could retain their employees and retain their programs and not have to cut everything out. Now, this might come too late in a certain sense because Janet Yellen isn't going to be in place until February sometime. And the cuts are going on right now because, things are expiring all over and state revenues are collapsing. So I think we need help quickly, and I don't know whether Jay Powell is going to be there for it, but maybe Janet Yellen and Jay Powell can have informal talks before she takes over as the Treasury Secretary, and maybe she'll be able to persuade him to do something. I certainly hope so. I will be pressuring for that myself in various ways. So I just wanted to tell you that. But anybody, go on with Dave. Those two pieces are put into a separate bill from everything else. The state local aid and liability shield bill is designed not to pass. So as bad as the liability protection is, it's also irrelevant. It won't become law in this Congress. I think that was a very insightful thing for Dave to proceed, and I think it's correct. Let's then move to the part that does have the potential to pass. I say potential because there's no final answer on whether Democrats will accept something without state and local aid, though they're certainly talking like they will. I think Pelosi will in the end. I think Schumer will. I think Schumer's already on board, especially if the pot is sweetened with $160 billion for stimulus checks, as now seems likely. The fact that there's a second bill can allow them to say they were for it but merely outvoted. Seems like Republicans will support the $748 billion package as well, at least in enough numbers to pass it. But again, there's no clarity here. I should say that splitting the bills apart was McConnell's idea. So it's likely that he'd bring it to the floor with enough votes on his side if Democrats agree. Why would Mitch McConnell suddenly support it? Because, as other people are saying, the reason why he would support it is because the Democrats are ahead in Georgia, according to the polling right now. Both Democrats are ahead in Georgia. And McConnell correctly perceives that the chances of the two Republican scumbags winning in Georgia are sufficiently great that their chances of winning could be increased if the Republicans were seen to have passed a stimulus bill along with the Democrats. On the other hand, if the Republicans oppose stimulus checks and only help with the unemployment bill, certainly the Democratic candidates are going to tag them and tag McConnell for that, and they're going to run that campaign partly on getting rid of Mitch McConnell. So right now, McConnell correctly perceives that it's not in his interest to deny a stimulus bill. And by the way, if you want to know the full game that Mitch was playing, it seems to me that Mitch was not in favor of retaining Trump as the president of the United States. His interest before the election was in getting Amy Coney Barrett in. Once he got her in, he didn't care any longer. He wasn't talking anything about stimulus bills. Trump couldn't get him to say a word about stimulus bills after that. Why not? Because before the election, he didn't want Trump, I think, taking credit for stimulus bills, because he didn't want the Republican Party to be Trump's party. He wanted the Republican Party to be McConnell's party. I think McConnell betrayed Trump in September, October, and early November. Trump missed seeing that he needed the stimulus bill before the election, and he didn't hold Amy Coney Barrett hostage to get Mitch to cooperate on that. So Mitch outsmarted Trump. outsmarted Pelosi in the CARES Act in March. He outsmarted everybody and has gotten exactly what he wants up to this time. The remaining piece of his puzzle is to get these two senators in, to get them reelected. And if he has to pass a bill with stimulus checks and more unemployment insurance in order to do that, he'll have no problem with that. Not only that, he'll want to do it because it would save the hold he currently has on the judicial system of our country. He then would be in a position not only on the judicial appointments, but on the cabinet appointments. He could harry Biden from the beginning in denying Biden his cabinet appointments. Make him pass people. He could force Biden to hire people who would not be confirmed, who would be acting heads of the departments. I think Mitch wants to create total chaos for the first 2 years of the Biden administration so that the Republicans get back into control of both houses of Congress in 2023. So Mitch is playing for a frozen government, for blaming Biden, for tanking everything. And if he has to pass a relatively minor stimulus relief survival bill to do that, to carry people through for the first few months of 2022 before he freezes everything, he's happy to do that. So that's where we are now. To go on with what Dave has to say, the bill includes $300 a week enhancement for all forms of unemployment benefits. That's the pandemic unemployment benefits, the regular unemployment benefits, for 16 weeks. It extends the two expiring programs, the one for gig workers and freelancers, the other for extended benefits, also by 16 weeks. No retroactive benefits are granted. So Nancy Pelosi wanted retroactive benefits going back to September. She's not getting it. Why not? Because the lady gave away her leverage last March. The bill renews the Paycheck Protection Program with $300 billion for small business, including more money for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the EIDL, and a second draw for those who have already received a forgivable loan. This part, incidentally, does include 501c6 organizations, the lobby organizations, to get PPP loans. That includes chambers of commerce, boards of trades, and other business leagues. In other words, lobby groups can get these loans, but people cannot get low-interest loans. They cannot get real relief. These are going to be forgivable loans. They're essentially going to be grants. People can't get what essentially are going to be grants. These frickin' lobbying groups can. There's $82 billion for schools, $45 billion for transportation. Dave says, of which I believe the majority goes to airlines. I think that's true. Sarah Nelson had some success. $35 billion for healthcare providers, $25 billion for rental assistance, not just Sarah Nelson, but the airlines themselves. $35 billion for healthcare providers, $25 billion for rental assistance, and an extension of the eviction moratorium to January 31st, at which point the new president can extend the moratorium through executive action. $16 billion for vaccination costs and testing and tracing, which is, Dave says, and I agree, a shockingly low number. 13 billion. Yeah, we're just intent on never stamping this virus out. Never stamping it out. Just won't spend enough money to stamp it out. 305,000 dead. 3,484 today when I last looked. And we won't stamp it out. Won't spend enough money. 13 billion for farmers and fisheries, 13 billion for enhanced nutrition assistance and food bank funding, 12 billion in low-income community grants, 10 billion for childcare providers, 10 billion for broadband deployment, which is a nice long-term investment, but puzzling in an emergency bill indeed. The forgiveness of a $10 billion loan to the U.S. Postal Service, $5 billion in emergency substance abuse prevention, an extension of student loan forbearance until April, and the extension of an obscure CARES Act provision that allows defense contractors alone among every profession to be paid not to work. Defense contractors don't have to work. All the rest of us do. Well, not for those who are retired or on Social Security. The bill is partially paid for with $430 billion from the Treasury Federal Reserve money cannon. The $430 billion, of course, was turned back to the Treasury by the Fed, and $130 billion left over from the previous PPP. That means there's only $188 billion in new money, but that's really an accounting gimmick. The old money wasn't getting used, and the majority of it was earmarked to corporate bonds. You could stretch and say that some of it could have gone to state and local governments and Fed loans, but the Fed has the power to make those loans under its own authority right now and should be pressured to do so. That's what I was talking about before. That refers to another unsanitized column by Dave some months ago, showing that the Fed had the power to make loans under Section 14 of the Fed Act. This is all taking too long to come up, so let me stay here. This bill is more than McConnell has previously offered by my count. The HEALS Act, which had nominally more spending, included the liability shield poison pill. As such, wasn't a serious effort. It also didn't even have enough support among the Republicans for McConnell to pass it. His eventual skinny bill was $650 billion. It fills a number of holes with inadequate but still excellent funds. If you want to be mad about it, be mad that we're in the middle of a historic state and local budget crisis, with more burdens being placed on these governments due to vaccination costs, only a portion of which would be covered by this bill, and the Fed still haven't appropriated $1 to cover those shortfalls. That will have long-lasting effects, stunting economic growth in 2021 with local austerity. Whether Democrats will take what's left depends on developments. One-time stimulus checks of $1,200, 1/4 of the full 16-week enhanced unemployment value are not part of the bill, and Bernie Sanders is, of course, pushing for inclusion of those, and he goes into that. And he points out that they'd be mean-tested. He also points to administrative problems in getting the money to people quickly if they base this on 2019 taxes as opposed to 2020 taxes. But the point being, he goes into the Democrats who were forced, okay, to negotiate with themselves because they failed to provide relief in the initial package for the duration of the emergency, and it predictably ran out. The failure was present at the outset. Thank you, Nancy Pelosi. Okay, and the negotiations since have been play acting. Only the threat of Republicans losing the Senate in Georgia has made them willing to go even this far. Yes, Dave makes that point. So Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer blew it, but they blew it a long time ago during the original CARES Act that everyone supported, including Sanders. He can take a little blame for that himself, actually. And he can. I've always thought that Bernie was not on the spot for that bill. He hadn't read it. He was still recovering from his collapse at the end of the campaign. I don't think he was paying attention. I don't think he had any of his financial people go over that bill. If he had, then certainly Stephanie would have told him about the money cannon for the rich. He certainly should have had her take a look at it. Certainly should have. He missed the trick. He missed a big trick. Okay. So that's that one. The other article I just was talking about, okay, that appeared on August 13th, 2020. Said the Fed can still save state, okay, and local governments. Okay, I'm not going to go through that one here because I've been through it, okay, before, but okay, I'll add that to the links, okay, a little later, and you can check it out again, and you can see that it was possible to do lending under the Fed's Section 14 authority rather than the Section 13 authority, okay, that is being used now. Also, if they'd used Section 14 authority, then the Fed would not have had to get consent from the Treasury for the interest that it wanted to charge. The Fed would be free under Section 14 to charge close to zero interest to the state and local governments. That's what would have made that program a success under Section 14. Certainly, that could have been done and should have been done and still should be done to take care of the state and local problem without even have to worry about the frickin' corporate immunity thing. Then when Mitch comes back for the corporate immunity, it would be the Democrats' turn to stonewall him. Okay, today Dave had a piece on the return of checks, which of course is current as of earlier today. I'm just checking here to see if I need to share that. I may not have to. Dave points out that a stimulus check at $1,200 per person and $500 per child is typically scored at $300 billion, cut it in half, and you're at $150 billion, which paired with the bipartisan relief bill would get you to $900 billion. And he says that appears to be precisely what's going down. So adults would get a $600 check and children $250 if that holds. So a two-worker family with two children would get $1,700 if they were still working. And as long as the Republicans do not get their way with respect to the unemployment checks, if the two adults were not employed, they would be getting $2,600 from that source on a monthly basis. and also $1,700 getting a stimulus check. So for 1 month anyway, they would be getting $4,300, which would be a boost for them. Of course, in many cities, it would still be inadequate and would not be much. Okay. So what Dave talks about here is that it still would be means tested, and this was problematic in March because the means test was based on 2019 tax data, or for those who hadn't paid taxes yet, 2018 tax data. So someone who lost their job in March but made a good living previously would not get the check. He said this problem is even worse now. Basing the means test on 2019 tax data wouldn't capture any of the COVID-related job losses and the wild swings in people's income since the virus hit. He points out that that's insane. So what he suggests is that what would have to be done is to make the checks 2020 tax return event, and you should just give them to everybody. And if they're not entitled to it, then capture the money on the back end. In other words, means test by means of recapturing the money given to people. And so that's what he's recommending that should be done. Now, how bad is it that they're just restricting this to $900 billion? It's bad. It's the idiocy. It's the usual idiocy. The assumption that the federal government cannot spend more than a particular magic number, an arbitrary magic number picked out by idiots with no economic knowledge. Oh, we can't spend more than $1 trillion because it would sound bad. We would sound fiscally irresponsible. After we had these huge deficits on behalf of Donald Trump, suddenly we have to worry about fiscal responsibility and austerity. You know the hypocrisy in this. We just passed an enormous budget for the military. Nobody talked about austerity or thought of austerity or thought of fiscal responsibility then. Nobody. So Dave has some more to say about the new relief bill. So there'll be a link there so you can read it. But basically, the story is as I've given it and as he's given it but thus far. Okay, a couple of other things. I want to share this thing. So as of yesterday, there were progressives, CPC, was calling for direct payments of at least $2,000 for working families. Okay, and you know who else was calling for at least $2,000 for working families? Donald Trump was posturing $2,000 for working families when he was quiet all summer about more stimulus bills and much of the fall. And he didn't push very hard, even in the run-up to the election. But now suddenly, he wants $2,000 to be sent to families, sort of as a goodbye gift, so people will remember him fondly in 2024, just in case Senator McConnell wants to turn the party back to him in 2024. That is, if both of those guys are still alive. Anyway, in a letter sent over the weekend and publicized Tuesday, progressives in Congress demanded that the leaders include direct payments of at least $2,000 for workers and families, as well as the return of enhanced unemployment benefits, which the Republicans allowed to expire over the summer, even as millions remained out of work. And members of the CPC, including Jayapal, Ro Khanna, and Katie Porter, pointed out that the unemployment benefits, the enhanced ones, had an enormous impact in alleviating poverty, increasing food security, replacing income, and raising aggregate spending levels that are crucial for stimulating the economy. And so they did. But of course, at that point, Senator McConnell wanted to make an impact in relation to the economy because they were still interested in having a good economy going into the election in November. And they were lucky that the economy hadn't completely collapsed by election time. So people did not punish the Republican senatorial candidates as much as they might have if they had been reading the papers or taking any sort of effort to understand what was going on in D.C. Anyway, the progressives were telling everybody they had to follow the economic data and see that we needed to expand unemployment insurance benefits and send out monthly checks. Ro Khanna and Katie Porter were urging that. And Bernie Sanders and Rashida Tlaib said lawmakers must listen to the demands of more than 60 grassroots groups, also calling for cash stimulus. Gee, they should have asked us, but with this little group here, we would have told them about the importance of cash stimulus benefits to our little group, right? The letter was signed by organizations including People's Action, Public Citizen, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and Indivisible. The groups collectively represent actually millions of Americans. A poll released in September by Gallup and Franklin Templeton showed 7 in 10 Americans, including 82% of Democrats, 64% of Republicans, and 66% of independents, support additional relief checks. That's amazing. Nothing is as popular as that, except maybe for Medicare for All. The organizations noted that as they wrote the letter, there were millions of Americans, 92 million Americans were uninsured or underinsured, healthcare-wise, that is. A crisis that's been exacerbated by mass unemployment and the loss of employer-sponsored benefits for tens of millions of people. More than 20 million people have been unemployed since the pandemic began, they added. If there are 92 million Americans who are uninsured, or underinsured, well, we have to know who the uninsured are. If you combine them, it's hard to give an estimate of how many people are dying due to lack of insurance. We've got a figure for that, and that's 1 out of every 781 people. If we figure 60 million are uninsured, which I think is probably a pretty good estimate by this time, we're probably looking at 78,000 people. I don't know to what extent that would overlap with the COVID statistics, but by itself, that's 78,000 people who are dying because they don't have health insurance. Just something you should be aware of, people. Congress cannot continue to ignore the hunger, pain, and economic uncertainty that millions of people are facing, said the letter. People need access to cash to survive the next round of job losses, to pay for rent and food, keep their families alive. Common Dreams reported last week millions of Americans are headed for absolute disaster after the new year, as the eviction moratorium put in place in September by the CDC is set to expire. 12 million renters owe an average of $5,850 in back rent and utilities. And many landlords have begun filing eviction paperwork, according to the Washington Post. I don't know what the landlords expect to do with their property when they've thrown all those people out. Where are they going to find the people to fill their places? It doesn't make any sense to me. Nearly 26 million Americans also reported having insufficient food last month. I guess I do know what they can probably do is they can sell their places to Blackstone or BlackRock or whatever, Black Shtick or whatever it is. And they can then own all those properties and get asset value pumped up. Oh, and by the way, the Fed thinks that the high price of homes isn't really a long-term problem. That's going to right itself when the economy comes back. I didn't understand that bit of logic in Jay Powell's reasoning, why he thought that. I thought he was being far too sanguine about that. I think Bernie Sanders knows there's a housing crisis. I don't know if Jay Powell knows that. Nearly 26 million Americans also reported having insufficient food last month. Nonprofits that run overwhelmed food banks across the country are counting on Congress. So you're getting the picture. People are in dire straits. They're suffering. They need direct check payments. The best hope at this point, most probably, is that they'll get a $1,200 payment. So what happens after that? That'll help for January or thereabouts if it can be delivered in an efficient way, which is not clear, as Dave has made clear in his column. But what happens after that? What happens if the people in Georgia see the 1,200 as a godsend and don't look past it and see what the Republicans that they're about to reelect into office have in store for them after January? Because you can be sure that Kelly Loeffler and Perdue in Georgia are not going to be voting any more relief bills anytime soon. Even if they do vote for this one, it's not clear they'd vote for this one, though maybe Mitch would be able to bring them along and persuade them, look, it would be real good for your campaigns if you actually voted for this one. But if they do, it's the last one they're going to vote for until Trump or somebody equally horrible is back in power. Probably a good many people are going to be dead by then because they don't have a place to live. Anyway, Rashida and Bernie were working on this together. They were tweeting together. They were, I'm sure, talking together. And this is what was going down. Rashida, the firebrand, was helping out. One of my favorite firebrands. Now, all we got to do is get these. All we got to do is get these firebrands working to get rid of Nancy Pelosi. That would be very good if they could see their way clear to risk it. I think the rewards would be great. Okay, another article by Jake Johnson today concerning the stimulus payments, yet a later article. Here's the quote from John Thune in this one. He said that some of the negotiators are considering checks amounting to between $600 and $700 per person. Okay, for the stimulus checks. Okay. Also, Politico is reporting today that this package is likely going to leave out state and local funding and the liability shield. Of course, I hope it does. I think if the liability shield somehow gets in there, then it's going to be very tough for the Democrats, because if they don't vote for the bill, then sure, the Republicans are going to use that in ads in Georgia to try to get back the Senate. So the politics of getting the Senate are very important in how this bill is going to be settled. And according to the Washington Post, the addition of the stimulus checks is expected to come in part by reducing the amount of unemployment aid. Some of the leadership in Congress has told other lawmakers they're planning on reducing the number of unemployment benefits by 1 month from the bipartisan plan. Okay, so instead of it covering 4 months of unemployment benefits, it might cover only 3 months of unemployment benefits. No, but they've got some SNAP assistance in there. Jeff Stein says congressional leadership's $900 billion package added checks like $600 to $700, but is expected to shrink duration of unemployment benefits from the Romney Manchin plan by as much as 1 month per 2 people briefed on talks. Well, that's what, of course, they're saying, but Bernie is going to continue to demand one-time payments of $1,200 and $500 per child, and the CPC has been calling for at least $2,000. So if all those people say nobody's going home and there's not going to be a government spending bill until you agree to this, and they're stubborn enough, maybe they'll be able to get $600 per adult, $600 per child, and the 4 months of unemployment relief. That would be good, but the key to this whole thing is getting the Democrats, the Senate. If Democrats do not win, there's no choice for further relief, even if the economy should totally tank as we move into the spring due to COVID effects. I mean, folks, 2,994 fatalities just yesterday, 2,999 fatalities. Yeah, 2,999 fatalities as of yesterday on the Worldometer site, and 3,484 today when last I checked it. If I go back and check it now, it might be even more. Bernie keeps saying we must do more, we must do more, we must do more. But of course, in this Congress, the one that has not yet ended, Bernie is just a senator, who's the ranking member of the Budget Committee in the Senate. That's who he is. He's got some influence, okay, with mass movements, of course, but the people in Congress are not listening to mass movements as yet. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, "I will not vote for a COVID package. The package doesn't include survival payments and unemployment relief for the people." Says it's a red line. It's also common sense. And Pramila Jayapal, okay, the newly elected chair of CPC, said Tuesday, the Progressive Caucus is united in opposition. Any COVID relief package must include survival checks and enhanced unemployment assistance, the two most effective ways to put money directly into people's pockets. The apparent breakthrough in long-standing stagnant coronavirus relief negotiations followed a pair of meetings Tuesday between Democratic and Republican congressional leaders, talks that came days before the government is set to shut down. With that passage of a sprawling year-end funding bill, lawmakers are seeking to attach the COVID-19 relief package to the legislation, which must pass by Friday night. As I said earlier, it's very likely that date will be postponed until Wednesday of next week, December 23rd, which I'm sure is the date that the politicians are planning to exit D.C. One more little item before I give it over to you for going over comments and things like that. There is a bit of good news on the cabinet front from Jake Johnson today. Quote, two powerhouse leaders, environmentalists applaud Biden's selections of Granholm and also McCarthy. This is not Kevin McCarthy, I have to add, for key climate posts. There is Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan. She was a very good governor in her time, but was term limited. Might not have won anyway due to the recession, which of course was not her fault. But she was a very good governor by and large. Anyway, grassroots environmental groups that have been demanding a cabinet which dedicated to pursuing an ambitious climate agenda applauded Joe Biden's reported decision to nominate former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm to lead the Energy Department of Energy. And Natural Resources Defense Council head Gina McCarthy to serve as National Climate Advisor to the President. These particular selections are a major victory for the broad and diverse movement pushing Joe Biden to keep top contenders with dangerous fossil fuel ties out of his cabinet and administration. Colin Rees, senior campaigner at Oil Change by U.S., said in a statement shortly after news of the picks broke on Tuesday evening. And he complimented Gina McCarthy as a proven climate advocate with the experience to hit the ground by running and coordinate an all-out government response to the climate crisis. So she's going to be like the climate czar, I guess. And, quote, Jennifer Granholm is an experienced leader with a strong record of support for renewable energy in opposition to the disastrous Keystone XL and Dakota Access oil pipelines. So those were some of the bona fides of Jennifer Granholm. Also, she's a very good administrator, which makes this quite good. Now, Biden had previously said he was considering returning to industry-friendly former Energy Secretary Ernest, I guess it's Moniz, to his old post. That was a move environmentalist warns would spell disaster for the hopes of a transformative climate agenda. As Common Dreams reported late last month, dozens of environmental groups mobilized in an effort to dissuade Biden from picking Moniz or anyone else with ties to the fossil fuel industry. Also, Moniz was very much tied to the nuclear power industry as well. It's even worse. Quote, shout out to all the grassroots groups who opposed his nomination and opened up the space for more ambitious policy, unquote, tweeted Jamie Henn, director of Fossil Free Media. And Henn pointed to a 2016 event at which Granholm was asked whether she sided with the Standing Rock Sioux in opposition to the Daytona Access Pipeline. She said, yes, I do. We ought to do everything we possibly can to keep fossil fuel energy in the ground and developing the renewable side. If confirmed as Energy Secretary, said Henn, Granholm's, quote, first order of business should be shutting down DAPL, KXL, Line 3, Line 5, and other dangerous fossil fuel projects. She is a Clinton ally, okay, it is said. And I believe that she has been a Clinton ally. She was certainly a supporter of Clinton's during the 2016 campaign. But she is also someone who's been very serious about the environment and climate for her whole career. You have to remember, Debbie Dingell is also a Clinton ally. She's also from Michigan, and she's also plenty progressive. So Clinton did have some people who wanted her in, but for a variety of reasons. Who are progressives and who are Green New Dealers. Congrats to Gina McCarthy, who has been a great partner and ally to the Sunrise Movement, said Evan Weber, Sunrise's political director. Quote, she's listened and worked alongside us to push for Joe Biden to be bolder and braver. We'll have to continue to push. That's what movements do. But good to know we'll have an ear. And Daniel Aldana Cohn said, Gina McCarthy, he tweeted, Gina McCarthy signed their ambitious green stimulus proposal right away back in early March, long before people consolidated around the idea. As the head of the NRDC, this was an act of leadership, hoping she keeps pushing this big, bold vision, a green stimulus to rebuild our economy. That was an open letter and call to action in Congress. However, Winona Howder, executive director of Food and Water Watch, raised concerns about Gina McCarthy's record on fracking during her time as head of the APA. And she said, Winona Howder said, quote, Gina McCarthy played a key role in implementing the Obama administration's fossil fuel friendly, all of the above energy policy, unquote, she said in a statement Wednesday. In real terms, that meant to massively expanding the dangerous form of drilling known as fracking and suppressing vital investigations into fracking's impact on clean water. So, in other words, it's not all good with respect to the record of Gina McCarthy in the past. Howder also said, years later, there's a staggering amount of evidence about the risks that fracking and drilling waste pose to human health, our air and water, to the climate. And the science is clear. Gina McCarthy owes it to the communities being harmed by fracking to redeem herself in this new role and to push for policies that move the country off fossil fuels. So there it is. There's actually a lot more praise, both for McCarthy and for Granholm. And so that's it. That seems to be some good appointments made by Biden for a change. Let's hope that that continues to be the case. So, let me get to your comments now. Your comments are strangely limited in my comments section tonight. I have no idea why. They start at 9:03. Here they are. At first it looked like they ended at 9:18, but apparently they just flashed on my screen. So, Carmen said, migraine from hell weather. Kay says, People's Party is having a podcast in climate change, and Michael E. Mann was on for an hour today on Tom Hartman 2. Carmen says, AOC ain't going to play along. I guess she's loyal to rotten Mama Bear. Well, as I said before, let's just see. She's getting a lot of pressure. Let's just see if she rethinks her position. Kay says, I have high hopes for Nina here in Ohio. So do I. I think Nina will be able to raise a lot of money from the grassroots and will be competitive with whoever Kay is running against her. Carmen says, there's a good article here. I presume that's an article on Nina. Gregory says at 9:13, same here. I'll help her create her own political identity separate from Bernie. It will help her create her own political identity separate from Bernie and would help her out a lot more long term. I certainly agree, but I think she has a political identity apart from Bernie already. I mean, she has the hello somebody identity. And that's quite an identity. It really is. Kay says, I hope so, Gregory Mallard. Carmen says, I'm tired of looking at her leather-faced, drunk arse anyway. Go poof, Pelosi. Gregory says, wino, laugh out loud. Carmen says, big time. Her designer ice cream labels are liquor and wine names like Goldschlager, MD 2020. What is MD 2020? And Cisco. Is Cisco a wine name? I thought that Cisco was a group connected with wiring up the internet for everybody. Greg says, we need a minimum stimulus payment of $2,000 a month per person. The Automatic Boost to Communities Act, funded by $1 trillion coins. Rashida Tlaib and also Pramila Jayapal. On that bill, watch that bill on the congressional site. Carmen says the checks are going right back to corporations, industries anyway, except for the lick bit that may go to the underground for weed and such. Well, the underground's probably incorporated by now anyway. Carmen says a little bit typo. Greg says we need to flip the 2 U.S. Senate seats here in Georgia to get it through the Senate. Loeffler and Perdue are against the people getting another stimulus check. They are. But I don't think they're going to vote against this particular stimulus check because it'd be too easy to run ads against them. Kay says, what have you been hearing on that in Georgia, Greg Mallard? Greg says Ossoff and Warnock are pulling ahead of Loeffler and Perdue in the Senate runoffs here. I've been working on efforts to be sure that Ossoff and Warnock do get elected. Well, that's great, Greg, but also we have to keep in mind that according to the polls, even if they can be trusted in Georgia, with some of the people who analyze polls say they can, that they weren't off in Georgia as they were in so many other states. It's also true that a 1 point lead or 2 point leads in Georgia are within the margin of error. And the Republicans tend to outperform the polls. And that's especially true of those Republicans who are nasty Republicans. People don't like to admit that they're for those Republicans, but for some reason they take pleasure in going into voting booths and also sending mail-in votes where they give their vote to these horrible people. Kay says, great to hear. And Greg says, yeah, I'm a DPG organizer. Steve Gonzo says Kelly Loeffler, her husband, bought their mansion for $10.5 million in 2005. The house was appraised in 2016, and the value was put at $4.1 million. No one knows why, but it did cut their tax bill by more than $100K per year. They bought off the appraiser. Oh, they're such crooks. So glad we're in FB again tonight. I miss talking to me friends here. So do I. Barbara says, if they get corporate immunity, we have lost this fight. $600 is not a lifeline. I know. I don't think they're getting the corporate immunity. I don't think that's happening. I think that's going by the wayside this time. And Greg says, agreed. I've been so busy doing campaign organizing since the middle of August. Kay says, I bet. Greg Mallard. Kay says, our revolution is coming up here to campaign for Nina too, among others. And Carmen says, McConnell is on serious, oppressive, fascist shit. And Greg says, the only way to demote the Moscow Mitch is to elect Ossoff and Warnock. I hope they're running on that. I hope they're running against Mitch as well as against Perdue and Loeffler in Georgia, Greg. And I hope they're correctly putting the blame on Mitch for why people haven't had stimulus checks a long time ago, for why people haven't had a basic income a long time ago, because it is due to Mitch. Now, granted, Nancy Pelosi screwed up in the CARES Act, but that doesn't change the fact that trying to pass new stimulus bills got stymied by Mitch, who was not willing to go along with Nancy Pelosi's efforts at stimulus bills. So he was still the negative one. Steve says Ohio's reporting 5,409 new COVID-19 cases. Deaths rose to 7,777. Hospitalization rose to 33,375. Thanks, Steve Gonzo. Kay says Stark County is still purple where I live. People are so stupid. Steve Gonzo says, Pat the Progressive at Pat the Burner. Couldn't be more honored and excited for our interview with the future Congresswoman Nina Turner to air tomorrow on her podcast. Hello, somebody. Crown here's a small clip. Crown, here's a small clip about our parody book, The Yas Queen Chronicles, which are available here, http savageandpat.com. Is that Savage Joy? Has he got a website with Savage Joy? Kay says, Ohio Medicaid still has not gotten any Medicaid company fixed yet either. This state sucks in many ways. Carmen says, Powell may have become a Grinch with a heart Powell may have become a Grinch with a heart. Republican, after seeing the needless death and suffering under Adolf. I'm not sure Powell was ever a Grinch. I think Trump wanted someone who wouldn't be so tight-fisted at the Fed. And I think he got that. Bob, because Trump wanted to run deficits. And he didn't want the Fed interfering with high interest rates. Barbara Wernick said, I'm so frustrated with this, or if that, fuck this, we need demands. Barbara says, no, they won't. Never, you're dreaming. They're now sending us 600 with a vote for corporate immunity. I don't think they're voting for that. I don't think that's going to get in. And Loeffler and Perdue have the backing of a QAnon nutcase. Yeah. Well, she's in Congress now. Barbara says, and he is outsmarting us. Barbara says, bullshit. Evelina says, so is Pelosi getting her COVID relief? That is what she was holding out for, right? She's getting a little bit of COVID funds, but it's very small. What was it, 16 billion? Barbara says, you're being played. Do not vote for anything. And Barbara says, bullshit, it extracts others. Carmen says, is this you, Wolfbrand? Steve Wolfbrand is here. But that's not me. No, it's not Steve Gonzo. It's Barbara Wernick. That's Barbara Wernick. Kay says, Act TV had Alex Lawson on this morning about more info on SS. Check it out. It was very important, especially for those on disability income. And Steve Gonzo says, yesterday, California new cases, 35,384, lives lost, plus 290, New York, 10,000 POS cases, Northwest Arkansas, 2 counties, almost 9,000 cases. Huge number of cases. Steve says, I do not feel safe. Kansas GOP mayor resigns after threats over backing a mask mandate. Kay says Biden needs to fire all the SS heads as soon as he comes into office. I know. Carmen says austerity is still murder. You betcha it is. Obama did not fire the Bush ones, and we've been cut ever since. FYI. That's true. He did not. All those people have to be fired. They'll be alive. Their wickedness sustains them like demon possession. Kay says, I shared that Act TV post on my page if anyone wants to watch it. Carmen says, the landlords in cities are trying to attract the Bollywood demographic because they're docile and green. Kay says, it would be great to replace Pegosi with Nina Turner real soon. Well, I don't think Nina Turner is going to be the Speaker of the House for some time. So we can't really replace Pegosi with Nina Turner. I wish we could. Carmen says, yeah. Kay says, Nina will raise a ruckus if she gets into Congress for sure. Yeah, that's her brand. She'll raise a ruckus. She'll join with the other squad members to raise a ruckus. But the question is raising a ruckus enough? But it's something. Got to raise a ruckus to start anything. Carmen says 600 isn't enough. However, I hope it comes on a card. It would mean less COVID-infected currency and having to run around to cash it. Plus, we could order online. Yes, Carmen, much better. Nancy Gosling-Blackmar says, thanks for another great evening, Dr. Joe. Thank you for coming, Nancy. Very happy to see you here. Kay says, I'm not sure if seniors will get any, but mine goes directly into my bank act. So I will need to take it out ASAP so they don't screw up my Medicaid again. Shake my head. And Carmen says, Tasmania is fossil fuel free. Oh, and New Zealand has asserted that it is COVID free, that they have vanquished, the disease. And by the way, without a single vaccination thus far. Rob says, hey, Yoda. And Rob says, no YouTube today. I despise Facebook. I didn't have a chance to test out the simultaneous streaming, Rob. And I have too many fans here who cannot go to YouTube. So I had to accommodate them tonight. I shouldn't say fans. I have too many people here to watch me on a continuous basis. So I have to be here as well as on YouTube. I hope that by tomorrow I will have had a chance to do the simultaneous streaming, to be sure I know how to do the simultaneous streaming without any technical difficulties. I was a little busy today because of the war going on Twitter to try to get the squad to deny Nancy Pelosi the speakership. That is very, very important. Steve Gonzo says, at Rep. Thomas Massie in Tulsi introduced the Protect Our Civil Liberties Act to repeal the so-called Patriot Act and end illegal government surveillance. Yes, Steve. I knew they were introducing it. I'm glad they have introduced it. Of course, it has to be introduced once again in the new Congress. Doesn't hang over from Congress to Congress. It has to be introduced again in January. Tulsi will be gone, so Thomas Massie will have to take it over. If he wants a Democratic co-sponsor on it, he's going to have to find a Democratic co-sponsor. Bonnie is showing me something. Yeah, I was talking about that yesterday.
Yeah.
She's well, she gave the other 1.3 billion earlier.
Oh,
so she's given almost 6 billion now.
Oh, okay.
But she is Bezos's former wife. Even though she did that, though, she made $23 billion during the COVID crisis.
But she wants help in getting rid of it all.
Yes, I know. And she's getting the help, too.
Yeah.
And where were we? I'm sorry. Oh, here it is. Carmen says, it would be so nice if we could have a good president under Biden for a change. Yeah, we all think that, but we all doubt the capability or the goodwill of Biden in that particular direction. So we're waiting to see. And Rahul Majumdar says, words matter, stimulus is the incorrect term. It is. I think the correct term is survival checks. And Rahul says, use the phrase we use in Canada, emergency response benefit, because it is an emergency. That's a very good title, emergency response benefit. I really like it. I like survival benefits too. That's a bit sharper, Rahul. But for many people, these are survival benefits, economic survival benefits, certainly. Kay says, in Ohio, Nina has a long identity and a good identity as a fire breather, right? And Steve says, Mad Dog 2020. Kay says, Steve Gonzo 2020 has been a Mad Dog year for sure. Laugh out loud. Steve Gonzo said, nobody showed for Pompous Pompeo's his MAGA Xmas super spreader event. That's good. Nobody showed for the super spreader event. That is excellent. Not only did they avoid Mr. Pompous Pompeo, but they also avoided the COVID-19 that would undoubtedly be at his event. And Rahul says, the U.S. still adding 9/11 death totals daily with COVID. I know. The death toll today, when I last checked it, was 3,484 and still counting. And yesterday was 2,999. And we were at something like, I think it was either 945 deaths per million or 948 deaths per million. At the time I checked, we're only 15 behind the UK now. We've been rapidly catching up to the UK over the last 4 or 5 days. We have gained 10 deaths per million on the UK. And they haven't quit adding deaths too. They've had a bad time, still having a bad time. Carmen says, woohoo. Kay says, I saw Pompeo has COVID now. Maybe that's why everybody stayed away from his party. They didn't want to catch his COVID. And Carmen says, looks like we're going night-night soon. And says, Kay says, love you all. And Joe and Bonnie too. Missed talking to you all so much last night. We missed you too last night. I mean, believe me, we did.
Yes.
And I'm going to find out how to simultaneously stream to both places. I'm going to test it out. I know how. I just don't know what it's going to look like and what it's going to feel like and whether it's going to be satisfactory. I hope it'll work because I think occasionally I have to be on YouTube too. So Carmen says, what's this crazy about repealing the Civil Rights Act of 1964? No, there's nothing about repealing the Civil Rights Act. It was just the business of suspending parts of the Civil Rights Act by the corporate immunity provision. Yes, McConnell is horrible, but as I said before, it's also true that's the printer making noise. I don't know. I have no idea why it's on. I didn't turn it on.
I didn't touch anything.
So just has to be turned off. So anyway, that corporate immunity provision is not at this moment set to pass. So we can forget about that. Carmen says, we're beyond the emergency. What's the stage right before death? And then Carmen says, correction. Then Carmen says, COVID. Then Carmen says, thanks for the clarification, Dr. Joe. So I've now gotten there. I've read out all your comments. Unless you have one or two more, real quick, like, I'm going to say goodnight for tonight. I still have emails to catch up on and a little bit of other work to do as well.
I squashed up the avocados.
Thank you. Yes, I have some avocados to match up. Okay, to mash up. Because I have to make an avocado dip. And Kay says, love you all. Thank you for being here. We love you too, Kay. Dolores says, thank you and good night all. Thank you, Dolores.
Thanks
Thank
for the
you
pictures,
for being
Dolores.
here. Also, thanks for the pictures, Dolores, says Bonnie. I guess she enjoyed those pictures. So, good night all. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be back at 9. Oh, I'll also have a progressive short take.
No.
No, I'm not gonna make it now. I'm gonna make it tomorrow.
Okay,
I'm gonna do other things now.
okay. Why did the printer come on?
I don't know.
It's not even plugged in. Anything.
Carmen says night huggable Hulk. Oh, that's funny. Having trouble connecting? Please check your internet connection. No, I don't think I'm having any trouble. I think my internet connection.
And I just checked
is
mine,
strong.
it was good.
No, my internet connection is fine. This is a problem with you guys. I'm still live. Yeah, it won't end the broadcast. Maybe it will finally end the broadcast now. It evidently isn't communicating with StreamYard.
The camera.
Yeah, I'm going to turn the camera off. Okay. Let me do this.